The Vermont Grand Opera House glittered with champagne flutes and diamond necklaces, but Silas Warren's voice cracked on the high note he'd hit effortlessly for 15 years. 8:47 p.m., December 15th. The precise moment his perfect world shattered. Through the stage lights, he spotted her, a cleaning woman in the empty balcony, mop in hand, humming the impossible crescendo of "Oh Holy Night" while wiping seats. Those notes, the ones he'd avoided for 5 years, claiming artistic interpretation. Rage masked his fear. "You there with the mop?" His amplified voice sliced through applause. "Come sing for these generous donors. Show them how the help entertains themselves." 500 faces turned. The woman's hands trembled as she set down her supplies. Clara Miller, 27, 3 jobs, 1 dying grandmother, descended the stairs. She didn't know she was walking toward destiny. He didn't know he was about to lose everything that never mattered. Before we continue, please leave a like and let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. Silas Warren's rise to fame began with his mother's death, 8 years old. Standing beside her hospital bed, he'd sung "Amazing Grace" as the monitors flatlined. The nurses wept. His father, Richard Warren, pharmaceutical CEO with a heart frozen by Harvard Business School, merely nodded. "Good projection, son. We'll get you lessons." 26 years of lessons followed. Juilliard at 14, Carnegie Hall debut at 19, Grammy at 22. By 34, Silas commanded $500 million in accumulated wealth, music royalties, investments, and endorsement deals with luxury brands that loved his story. Orphaned boy conquers opera. What the magazines didn't print were the white gloves hiding scars from teenage years when he'd dragged razor blades across his palms, trying to feel something real. The chronic insomnia requiring Ambien and Xanax. The weekly sessions with Dr. James Whitfield, who'd been treating him since his 3rd fiancée, Margaret, left him at the altar saying, "You perform love, Silas. You don't feel it." His 47-room Vermont mansion echoed with silence. Staff called him sir and avoided eye contact. He hadn't sung without studio enhancement in 5 years, though nobody knew. The high notes that once soared now cracked in private. His voice coach, Marcus Brennan, had quit last spring. "You're technically perfect and emotionally dead." Clara Miller knew emotional death intimately. Her father, Thomas Miller, had been Vermont's most promising opera singer until her mother died birthing her. He'd raised Clara on Puccini and poverty, vodka and Verdi, until the morning of her 15th birthday when she found him hanging from the rafters of their garage. His final note reading, "My voice died with her. Forgive me." Grandmother Eleanor Miller, 82 now, had saved Clara from foster care. But salvation came with cost. Eleanor's mind was dissolving, Alzheimer's stealing memories like a thief in daylight. Clara worked nights at Sunshine Manor Nursing Home, mornings at Betty's Diner, Sunday afternoons playing piano at First Methodist. The Berkeley Scholarship had been her golden ticket out. She'd torn it up. Who else would sing Eleanor to sleep? Who else would remember the grandmother who'd raised her when everyone else walked away? The throat scar, a thin white line from a childhood bicycle accident, had almost severed her vocal cords. Doctors said she'd never sing properly. They'd never heard her at 2 a.m., singing lullabies to dying strangers who had no one else to ease their passing. The rage had been building since cocktail hour when Silas overheard board member William Thornton whisper to his wife, "Warren's got millions but no soul. Real talent doesn't need that much money to move people. The cleaning staff here probably have more authentic voices." The words burrowed under Silas's skin like shards of glass. Now, spotting the cleaning woman humming those impossible notes, his notes, the ones he'd built his reputation on, something savage awakened in him. He'd show Thornton what happened when the help tried to sing. "Don't be shy." Silas purred into the microphone as Clara descended the balcony stairs. 500 donors in their tuxedos and evening gowns turned like a single organism. Champagne glasses suspended midair. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's entertainment includes a special surprise. Our minimum wage friend here will demonstrate why some people clean stages while others command them." Clara reached the stage, her gray uniform stark against the burgundy curtains. under the lights. Silas could see her clearly 27, maybe younger. Exhausted eyes, hands reddened from bleach. The small scar on her throat caught the spotlight. Perfect, he thought. She'd croak like a dying bird, and Thornton would eat his words. "What's your name?" He held the microphone to her face. "Clara Miller." Her voice barely registered. "Clara's going to sing the prayer for us. The original version, Italian and English." He smiled, knowing the song's 4-octave range defeated most professionals. "Unless you'd prefer something simpler. Mary had a little lamb, perhaps." The audience chuckled uncomfortably. Mrs. Dorothy Chen, head nurse at Sunshine Manor, stood up from table 12. "Mr. Warren, this is inappropriate." "It's fine," Clara interrupted, her voice stronger. She looked directly at Silas, and he saw something unexpected in her eyes. Not fear, pity. "No accompaniment?" she asked. "Real talent doesn't need help." He stepped back, gesturing to the empty space center stage. Clara closed her eyes. Inside her mind, she wasn't in the opera house. She was 15 again, standing in the garage, her father's body swaying gently. His final recording of the prayer, playing on repeat from his old cassette player. She'd sung along with his ghost for hours until the police came. Her first note emerged soft as candlelight. "I pray you'll be our eyes." The Italian verse followed, each word carved from memory, from loss. From 3 a.m. nights singing to James Patterson, who was dying alone. From Betty's diner, where she hummed while scrambling eggs for truckers who tipped in quarters. From her grandmother's bedside, where lullabies were the only language that penetrated Alzheimer's fog. When she hit the high C, the note Silas hadn't attempted live since 2019, something extraordinary happened. The champagne glass in Thornton's hand resonated, singing along, then another. Then dozens of crystal glasses throughout the hall created a harmonic frequency, as if the entire room had become an instrument. "Nella mia preghiera." Her voice soared higher, to the C-sharp that existed in the original score but that most singers modified down. Silas's hands began trembling. His golden microphone slipped from his fingers, striking the stage with a metallic crash that nobody noticed because 500 people had stopped breathing. Mrs. Chen was crying. So was Marcus Brennan, seated in the back, watching his former student witness what he'd lost. The elderly residents at Table 3, special guests from Sunshine Manor, reached for each other's hands. Samuel Rodriguez, blind for 30 years, whispered, "I can see her voice. It's silver and blue, like moonlight on water." Clara held the final note for 16 seconds. The silence that followed felt holy. Like the moment after lightning before thunder announces what everyone already knows: the world has changed. Then, eruption. The standing ovation began with the nursing home residents. Arthritis be damned. It spread like wildfire through the donors, the board members, even the waitstaff abandoning their stations to applaud. Clara opened her eyes, saw Silas on his knees retrieving his microphone with shaking hands, and did what he'd never expected. She walked off the stage. No bow, no acknowledgement. She climbed back to the balcony, picked up her mop, and returned to cleaning as if she hadn't just destroyed and rebuilt the universe in 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Silas remained frozen on stage, unable to continue the concert, unable to comprehend how a cleaning woman had just sung the notes that had abandoned him, the notes that had died with his ability to feel anything real. Silas hadn't slept in 72 hours. The concert had ended in disaster. He'd managed 3 more songs after Clara left the stage, his voice cracking on simple notes a freshman music major could handle. The donors pretended not to notice, but their pity felt like acid on his skin. Now, December 18th at 1:40 in the morning, he sat in his mansion's recording studio, replaying phone footage from the gala. 5 million views on social media. "Cleaning Lady Destroys Billionaire Singer" had become the week's viral sensation. But Silas wasn't reading comments. He was listening to Clara's voice, over and over, trying to understand how someone who mopped floors possessed what he'd lost. "She has what you need," Marcus Brennan had said that night, approaching him as he'd fled the stage. "Not technique, you've got more training than any singer alive. She has the thing you buried with your mother." The words haunted him. At 2 a.m., Silas called Michael Brooks, the private investigator who'd handled his third fiancee's background check. "I need everything on Clara Miller. Everything." Brooks delivered within 24 hours. The file was thin but devastating. Father Thomas Miller, Vermont Opera Company's rising star until 1997. Suicide by hanging, January 15th, 2012. Clara's 15th birthday. Mother Grace Romano Miller, died in childbirth. Raised by maternal grandmother Eleanor Miller, former secretary. Now stage 4 Alzheimer's patient at Sunshine Manor. The real gut punch came in the education section. Full scholarship to Berklee College of Music. Offered May 2015. Declined. Reason: family obligations. Silas stared at the acceptance letter Brooks had somehow obtained. Clara had turned down the exact program he'd graduated from, the launching pad for his entire career. She'd chosen changing bedpans over changing the world. The next detail stopped his heart. Medical records from 2009. Severe laceration to throat from bicycle accident. Partial damage to vocal cords. Patient advised to avoid strenuous singing. She sang like that with damaged vocal cords, December 20th, 2:15 a.m. Silas sat in his Bentley outside Sunshine Manor watching the night shift entrance. He'd been there 3 hours, working up courage he couldn't find. His phone showed 17 missed calls from his manager, Robert Hayes, who wanted to spin the viral video into a comeback story. But Silas wasn't here for publicity. He was here because he'd finally admitted the truth: Clara Miller had something he'd never had and desperately needed. Through the glass doors, he saw her pushing a medication cart down the fluorescent-lit hallway. She stopped at room 147, knocked gently, entered. Silas found himself walking toward the entrance, his body moving without permission. The night receptionist, half asleep, didn't recognize him in his baseball cap and plain clothes. He wandered the halls like a ghost, following the sound of singing, Celtic melody, ancient and mournful. "Danny boy." Room 147's door stood ajar. Silas peered inside. Clara sat beside a skeletal man whose breath rattled like November leaves. James Patterson. According to the door chart, 94 years old, no visitors listed. She held his hand, singing as if her voice could tether his soul to earth a little longer. "But come ye back when summer's in the meadow." The old man's eyes were closed, but tears streamed down his hollowed cheeks. Clara wiped them gently, never stopping the song. This wasn't performance. This was sacrament. Silas pulled out his phone, began recording. Not for social media for himself. To remember what real singing looked like. The device clattered to the floor. Clara's head snapped up. Their eyes met. He expected anger. Maybe fear. Instead, she looked exhausted. "Haven't you humiliated me enough, Mr. Warren?" He entered the room, picked up his phone. James Patterson's eyes fluttered open, focused on Silas with the clarity that sometimes preceded death. "You," the old man wheezed, "were in Phantom, Broadway, 1998. You saw it." Silas moved closer, surprised. 20 times. "My wife loved your voice." Patterson's grip tightened on Clara's hand. "But you don't sing like her. She sings like my Martha did. When our son died in Iraq. Like the world's breaking, but still beautiful." Silas felt something crack inside his chest. Without planning, without thought, he dropped to his knees beside the bed. "Teach me," he said to Clara. "Please, teach me to sing like that again." Clara studied him for a long moment. "You can't learn heartbreak, Mr. Warren. You have to earn it." "Then let me earn it. You have $500 million. You could buy Juilliard. Why do you need me?" Silas pulled off his white gloves, revealing the scars Clara had suspected were there. "Because I haven't felt anything real since I was 8 years old. Because I've forgotten why music matters. Because when you sang, I remembered my mother's last breath and realized I've been holding mine ever since. James Patterson laughed, a sound like rustling paper. Now you're talking sense, boy. Clara stood, smoothed her uniform. You want lessons? Here are my terms. 1 month. Volunteering here, night shift, like me. No media, no cameras, no grand gestures. You clean rooms, feed residents, change bedpans. You sing to them without microphones, without backing tracks, without your gloves. You eat in the cafeteria. Thursday is meatloaf, and it's terrible. You learn their names, their stories, their favorite songs. For lessons, for the chance to remember why we sing. She moved toward the door. Mr. Patterson needs his rest. What about money I could pay? I don't want your money. Mr. Warren, I want you to understand that some things can't be bought. She paused in the doorway. Be here tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Wear something you can bleach. You'll be cleaning up things you've never imagined. After she left, Silas sat with James Patterson another hour. The old man told him about Martha, about their son, about the Broadway shows they'd seen when life was golden and death was distant. When Patterson finally slept, Silas drove home to his 47 empty rooms and did something he hadn't done in 20 years. He called his father. Dad, it's me. I think I'm about to lose everything. And I think that's exactly what needs to happen. Richard Warren, who hadn't heard from his son in 6 months, sat up in his Singapore hotel room. Silas, are you all right? No, but I might be. Finally, there's this woman, Dad. She sings to dying people. She turned down Berkeley to care for her grandmother. She has nothing and everything, and I need to understand how that's possible. Who is she? Her name is Clara Miller, and I think she might save my life. The next night, December 21st, Silas Warren arrived at Sunshine Manor in jeans and a t-shirt that cost less than $30. Mrs. Dorothy Chen handed him a mop, a bucket, and a schedule. Room 247 needs attention. Mrs. Goldstein had an accident. Clara will show you what to do. For the first time in 34 years, Silas Warren was about to learn that some stages couldn't be bought, only earned, and that the most important audiences were the ones who wouldn't remember his name in the morning, but would remember how he made them feel in their last nights on Earth. The smell hit Silas first, disinfectant failing to mask human decay. Room 247 resembled nothing in his previous life. Mrs. Goldstein, 91, dementia-riddled, had painted the walls with her own feces, believing she was creating a garden for her long-dead husband. She thinks it's 1952, Clara explained, handing him rubber gloves. She's planting roses for Harold's return from Korea. Don't tell her he died in 1987. In her mind, he's still 23 and coming home next week. Silas gagged. Clara didn't flinch, just began cleaning with practiced efficiency. You wanted to learn, this is lesson 1. We sing to people who no longer know they're dying in rooms that smell like death. If you can't handle this, you can't handle truth. For 20 minutes, they cleaned in silence. Then Mrs. Goldstein began crying, calling for Harold. Without hesitation, Clara began singing, I'll Be Seeing You. Mrs. Goldstein calmed, smiled, reached for Clara's hand with fingers still dirty. You take over, Clara said to Silas. She needs the second verse. Silas's voice emerged strangled. Wrong. Not from the smell or circumstances, but from the realization that Mrs. Goldstein's face had transformed. She was young again in her mind. Beautiful. Waiting for love. His perfect pitch meant nothing here. Only presence mattered. By the third night, news of his volunteering had reached the residents. Samuel Rodriguez, 89, former jazz musician, blind for 40 years, requested Silas specifically. You're that fancy boy from the concert, Samuel said, his milky eyes somehow seeing everything. Sit, sing me something real. Silas attempted Summertime. Samuel stopped him after 4 bars. You sing like you're afraid of your own heart, son, like someone taught you that feeling was weakness. Samuel's hands, gnarled with arthritis, found the piano keys in the recreation room. Music isn't about perfect notes. It's about imperfect people finding God in the spaces between sounds. December 24th, Christmas Eve. Silas had been cleaning, feeding, singing for 4 straight nights. His Bentley sat in the parking lot beside Clara's 1998 Honda Civic. His manager had called 50 times. He'd ignored them all. That night, Clara taught him lullabies for the dementia ward. Simple melodies, but she sang them like prayers. Rock-a-bye Baby became a benediction. Twinkle, twinkle, little star transformed into a meditation on mortality. Take off your gloves, she said suddenly. What? You wear them to hide your scars. But Margaret O'Brien in room 189 has matching ones. Her son killed himself after returning from Afghanistan. She needs to know she's not alone. Silas removed the white gloves he'd worn for 15 years. The scars, pale railways across his palms, caught the fluorescent light. He felt naked, skinless. Margaret O'Brien took one look and pulled up her own sleeves. Her scars were deeper, angrier. My boy had those too, she said quietly. Before he found the gun, I tried to understand, but I couldn't. Maybe you can help me understand. That night, Silas sang Hallelujah for Margaret, his scarred hands holding hers. She wept. He wept. Clara watched from the doorway and thought, he's starting to break. Good. Only broken things can truly heal. December 28th brought an unexpected revelation. Silas was feeding Eleanor Miller, Clara's grandmother, in the memory care unit. Eleanor kept calling him William, becoming agitated when he corrected her. Just go with it, Clara advised. Fighting their reality only causes pain. But Eleanor grew more insistent. William, you came back from the war. I knew you would. I have your letters, all of them, and the ring you sent. Curiosity led Silas to the nursing home's archive room. Dust-covered boxes held decades of patient belongings. In a container marked E. Miller, he found them 43 letters from Vietnam, 1967 to 1969, signed William Warren. His hands shook. Warren was his father's surname. But who was William? The letters painted a love story. William, a young soldier from Vermont's wealthiest family, had fallen for Eleanor Romano, daughter of Italian immigrants. His family forbade the match. She was Catholic. Ethnic. Unacceptable. He'd enlisted to escape their control, promised to marry her upon return. The last letter, dated March 15th, 1969. My brother Richard thinks I'm foolish, but I'd rather die loving you than live in his cold world. If something happens to me, know that you made me real. Silas photographed everything, drove home at dawn, and confronted his father via video call. Who was William Warren? Richard's face, displayed on the screen from Singapore, aged 10 years in 10 seconds. How did you? Tell me. My older brother. The family heir who threw it all away for some Italian girl. He died in Vietnam, 2 weeks before his tour ended. Stepped on a landmine, saving 3 men. Richard paused. Why are you asking about ancient history? The Italian girl is still alive. She's Clara Miller's grandmother. Silence stretched across continents. Finally, Richard spoke. William would have been your uncle. He was everything I wasn't: warm, impulsive, capable of love. I spent my life trying to be his opposite, and I turned you into a machine like me. I'm sorry. Silas. January 1st, 2025. New Year's Eve had passed with Silas and Clara singing duets for the night shift residents. No champagne, no tuxedos. Just 2 voices harmonizing over Auld Lang Syne while people who wouldn't see another New Year smiled and swayed. They were cleaning the recreation room afterward when Clara found the courage to speak about her father. He left a suicide note, she said suddenly. Would you like to know what it said? Silas stopped mopping. If you want to tell me. My voice died when your mother died. I'm already a ghost, sweet girl. You have her voice and her heart. Don't let anyone silence either. Forgive me. Clara's hands gripped the mop handle. I found him on my 15th birthday. He'd been drinking, planning it for weeks. The last thing he ever said to me was, "You sound just like her when you sing." Clara. I turned down Berkeley because I was afraid that if I pursued music, I'd end up like him, destroyed by loss, hanging from rafters. So I chose safety, minimum wage, dying strangers, a grandmother who calls me by my dead mother's name. She finally looked at him. But then you showed up, with all your money and fame and perfect technique, and you were just as dead inside as my father before he made it literal. Silas set down his mop, crossed to her. Your father was wrong. His voice didn't die with your mother. It lives in you. I hear her in your high notes, him in your lower register. They're both there. Clara, you're not singing alone. She kissed him then, suddenly, desperately. It tasted like grief and possibility. They pulled apart immediately, Clara fleeing to the parking lot, but something had shifted, fundamental and irreversible. January 7th, Marcus Brennan visited during Silas's volunteer shift, found his former student feeding pureed vegetables to a stroke victim. Your voice is changing, Marcus observed. I can hear it when you speak. The tension's leaving. The armor's cracking. I haven't done vocal exercises in 2 weeks. Exactly. You're remembering that singing isn't about gymnastics. It's about truth. Marcus watched Silas gently wipe the patient's chin. That girl, Clara, she's teaching you what I never could. What's that? That the best voices come from the worst wounds, properly healed. January 10th. Local reporter Jennifer Walsh had been investigating Silas's whereabouts for 3 weeks. She cornered him in the parking lot at 3 a.m. Billionaire playing Mother Teresa makes great copy, she said. Smartphone recording. What's your angle? Reputation rehabilitation tax write-off. Clara emerged from the shadows. He's volunteering, period. And you are nobody, just like him. Here. Jennifer laughed. He's worth $500 million. That's not nobody. In room 147, James Patterson is dying alone. Silas sits with him every night, singing Irish folk songs because James is homesick for Galway. Tell me, Miss Walsh, what's the net worth of keeping someone company while they die? The reporter persisted. This is a story whether you cooperate or not. I can spin it how I want. Silas finally spoke. One concert. I'll give you exclusive coverage of one concert, but it happens here, in the cafeteria. 100 seats, residents and families only. All proceeds to Sunshine Manor. Deal. Jennifer's eyes gleamed. When? January 22nd. That's less than 2 weeks. Then we'd better start practicing, Clara said, taking Silas's scarred hand in public for the first time. January 14th. Deep in the nursing home storage room. Clara made a discovery that stopped her heart. A box of her father's belongings, donated after his death. Inside, a manuscript, The Girl Who Sang to Angels, an opera in 3 acts. She sat on the dusty floor, reading his composition. It was about her. Every note. Her childhood voice, her mother's death, the way she'd sung to sparrows and stray cats and anyone who'd listen. The finale was unfinished, stopping mid-measure with a note, I can't hear how it ends. Maybe she'll find it. Silas found her there an hour later, surrounded by scattered pages, sobbing. He was writing about me, she whispered. All those nights he locked himself away, drinking, composing. I thought he was choosing music over me. He was trying to capture me in notes, to prove I was worth something. Silas gathered the pages carefully. We could finish it. I don't know how. Yes, you do. You've been singing the ending every night for years, to Mrs. Goldstein, to James, to your grandmother. The finale isn't about angels. It's about humans singing to each other in the dark. That night, they worked until dawn, Clara humming melodies while Silas transcribed, his perfect pitch finally serving something beyond performance. They were writing resurrection, note by note. January 15th marked the 3-week anniversary of Silas's volunteering. He'd lost 15 pounds, gained calluses, learned 43 residents' names and stories. His insomnia had vanished. Exhaustion was better than any medication. But that evening brought unexpected drama. Clara's grandmother Eleanor had a moment of perfect lucidity during dinner. She looked at Silas, recognition dawning. "You're not William," she said clearly. "William died in 1969. But you have his eyes? Are you Richard's boy? The one who became famous?" Silas knelt beside her wheelchair. "Yes, I'm Richard's son." Eleanor reached into her housecoat pocket, pulled out a small velvet box. "William sent this from Saigon. Said to give it to his daughter someday. But the baby was a boy, Thomas. My husband never knew Thomas wasn't his. I've been saving this for 56 years. Inside was a simple gold ring with a tiny sapphire. An inscription read, "Until the stars fall, W." "Take it," Eleanor said. "For Clara. William would want love to win this time." Before Silas could respond, Eleanor's clarity dissolved. She began calling him William again, asking about the war. But the ring remained real in his palm, a message from the past about futures that could still be written. That night, Clara and Silas finished her father's opera. The final notes were so high, so pure, that only someone who'd transmuted pain into purpose could sing them. Clara's voice soared through the empty cafeteria, rehearsing for the concert that would change everything. Outside, January snow began falling. Inside, two broken people were discovering that harmony isn't about perfect voices, it's about imperfect hearts beating in time. Jennifer Walsh's article hit the internet at midnight on January 20th. Billionaire's cafeteria concert Silas Warren to perform in nursing home dining hall. Within 3 hours, the story had been picked up by every major outlet. CNN ran a segment titled, "From Opera House to Nursing Home, Warren's Bizarre Breakdown or Brilliant Comeback." Silas's phone exploded with calls he didn't answer. His manager, Robert Hayes, drove from New York, arrived at Sunshine Manor at 6 a.m., found his client mopping the memory care unit. "Have you lost your mind?" Robert demanded. "Carnegie Hall is calling. The Met wants a statement. There are photographers camped outside a nursing home in Vermont." "A nursing home. Good," Silas said, ringing the mop. "Maybe they'll donate to the Alzheimer's wing." "The concert, this cafeteria concert, it's career suicide." "My career's been dead for years, Robert. I've been lip-syncing to backing tracks since 2019. Did you know that—" Robert's face paled. "What be? Every live performance. Pre-recorded. The great Silas Warren, Vermont's pride, has been a fraud for half a decade. But 3 weeks ago, a woman who cleans toilets for minimum wage sang the notes I'd forgotten existed. So yes, I'm doing a concert in a cafeteria that smells like boiled cabbage and mortality, because that's where real music lives." By noon, the 100 cafeteria seats had become the most coveted tickets in America. Scalpers were offering $10,000 for a folding chair spot to watch a billionaire sing among hospital beds and wheelchair ramps. Silas refused all offers, personally selecting the audience 40 residents from Sunshine Manor, 30 family members, 20 staff members, 10 spots for Clara's friends from her other jobs. He allowed one camera, a documentary filmmaker named Patricia Huang, who'd spent 5 years recording stories in hospices. "No glamour shots," he instructed. "Film the residents' faces, not mine." The only crisis came when Clara discovered the plan. "You told that reporter about the concert without asking me." She confronted him in the supply closet, among bedpans and industrial bleach. "I'm trying to what make me famous? I don't want fame. Silas, I've seen what it did to you, to my father. I want to sing for people who need songs, not people who collect experiences. Then sing for Mrs. Goldstein, for Samuel, for James Patterson if he makes it 3 more days. The cameras won't matter if we're singing for them. Clara studied his face, saw something she hadn't expected: humility. You've really changed, haven't you? I'm trying to. You're helping. He pulled out Eleanor's ring, the one from William. Your grandmother gave me this, in a lucid moment. She wanted you to have it. Clara held the simple ring, read the inscription. Until the stars fall. She slipped it onto her right hand, not her left, not yet. Let's survive the concert first. January 21st brought unexpected grace. Eleanor Miller woke from her fog with stunning clarity, as sometimes happened near the end. She recognized Clara, truly recognized her, for the first time in 2 years. My sweet girl, Eleanor said, touching Clara's face. You have your mother's eyes and your father's sadness. I'm sorry I'm leaving you alone. You're not leaving yet, Grandma. Tomorrow, after I hear you sing. I've been waiting, but the clouds keep getting in the way. Eleanor turned to Silas, who'd been reading to her from a music theory textbook, the only thing that calmed her lately. You're the boy from the papers, the rich one. Yes, ma'am. William wrote about your father, said Richard was brilliant but frozen. Said he hoped Richard would learn to thaw before it was too late. Eleanor gripped Silas's hand with surprising strength. William would have liked you. You have kind eyes now. You didn't in the photos before, but you do now. Mrs. Miller, Silas said carefully. William's ring, the one you gave me for Clara. Should I? When you're ready. Both of you. When you stop being scared of happiness. Eleanor's clarity was already fading, the fog returning. I'll tell William you found each other. He'll be glad love won this time. By evening, Eleanor was gone again, calling Silas by William's name, asking about the war, but her words echoed, when you stop being scared of happiness. January 22nd arrived gray and sleeting. The parking lot filled with news vans, held back by hastily erected barriers. Inside, the cafeteria had been transformed not with decorations, but with presence. Every resident who could be moved sat in wheelchairs or supported chairs. The bedridden watched via tablets propped on their meal trays. Silas arrived at 6:30 in a simple black suit he'd bought at Target for $60. No jewelry except his mother's St. Cecilia pendant, hidden under his shirt. No gloves. His scars visible to anyone who looked. Clara wore her mother's wedding dress not because it was fancy, but because it was the only formal dress she owned. Ivory turned cream with age, simple A-line, no train or veil. She'd found it in a trunk in her grandmother's closet, still smelling faintly of the lavender sachets her mother had loved. You look, Silas stopped, searched for words that weren't cliché. Like a woman about to sing in a nursing home cafeteria, like someone about to change the definition of beautiful. Patricia Huang's camera captured them standing together, not touching but connected. Two people on the edge of transformation, 7 p.m. precisely. No introduction needed. The audience knew why they were there. Silas and Clara began with amazing grace. No accompaniment. Just their voices finding each other in the acoustic disaster of a room built for Jell-O and Medicare meetings. The harmonies weren't perfect. Clara's damaged vocal cords caught on certain notes. Silas's years of bad habits created occasional tension. But something else was happening. Truth was being told in musical form. They moved through the program, the prayer again, but different this time. Silas taking the lower part, supporting Clara's soar. Hallelujah, with Samuel Rodriguez playing piano despite fingers that barely bent. Danny Boy for James Patterson, who'd somehow survived to see this night. Tears streaming down his face that had no more fat to spare. 45 minutes in, halfway through the planned program, Silas stopped. There's something else, he announced. Clara's father, Thomas Miller, was composing an opera when he died. The Girl Who Sang to Angels. He never finished it. Clara and I completed it this week. She doesn't know I'm about to do this, and she might never forgive me. But Clara, this is your father's love letter to you. Let me help you sing it. Clara stood frozen, The manuscript appeared. Silas had secretly printed and bound it, distributed copies to the 3 musicians he'd hired from the Vermont Symphony, who'd been hiding in the kitchen. "I can't," Clara whispered. "You can?" "Mrs. Dorothy," Chen called out. "We all know you can." The opening notes emerged from the violin, simple, broken, a child's lullaby fractured by loss. Clara's father had written her childhood into music the morning she'd tried to sing her goldfish back to life. The afternoon she'd performed for an empty church because she needed to hear her voice echo back like her mother's might have. Clara began singing, her voice small at first, then growing as the story progressed. The opera told of a girl whose song could heal others but not herself, who gave her voice away piece by piece until she had nothing left but silence. But the finale, the part Clara and Silas had written together, transformed everything. The girl discovered that every piece of voice she'd given away had planted seeds in others' hearts. When she finally went silent, a chorus emerged, all the people she'd healed, singing her song back to her, different now, richer for having passed through other souls. Clara reached the impossible high notes her father had written, the ones he'd never heard her sing as an adult. The cafeteria's terrible acoustics somehow made it more beautiful, the imperfection of environment highlighting the perfection of emotion. When she hit the final note, a high D that shouldn't have been possible with her damaged chords, something extraordinary happened. Every person in the room who could still speak began humming along, finding harmonies that hadn't been written, creating a choir of the dying and the living, the famous and the forgotten, all united in one impossible moment of grace. The silence after felt sacred. Then James Patterson, 94 years old, 3 days from death, stood up. His legs, which hadn't supported him in months, held long enough for him to remain standing through the beginning of an ovation that would last 15 minutes. Others followed Samuel Rodriguez, fighting through arthritis. Mrs. Goldstein, lucid enough to know beauty when she heard it. Eleanor Miller, clear-eyed and present, seeing her granddaughter not as her dead daughter, but as Clara. Finally, fully Clara. "Now you're singing, son," Samuel called out to Silas. "Now you're finally singing." Eleanor reached for Clara's hand, then Silas's, joining them together. "William would be so proud," she said clearly. "Love won this time." As the applause continued, Silas did something that would become the defining image of his transformation. He removed his signature diamond earring, a $50,000 stone that had been his trademark for a decade. In its place, he threaded a simple silver ring, one Clara's father had worn, that she'd given him that afternoon. "For Thomas," he said to Clara. "For your father who loved you more than life, just not more than death. He would want to be here." Clara collapsed into him, and they held each other while 100 people in a nursing home cafeteria created an ovation that rivaled anything Carnegie Hall had ever produced. Not because the music had been perfect, but because it had been perfectly human. Patricia Huang's camera captured the final moment, 2 people who'd found harmony not in flawless notes, but in the spaces between breaths, in the cracks where light enters, in the places where professional music goes to die and something eternal gets born. Outside, the media waited for statements and sound bites. Inside, Silas Warren and Clara Miller were already planning their next performance Tuesday night for the midnight shift, when the dying most needed songs to light their way home. The morning after the concert arrived with cruel irony. While the internet exploded with Patricia Huang's footage, 20 million views in 6 hours, headlines proclaiming the concert that restored faith in humanity. Clara was racing through Sunshine Manor's hallways, following the emergency alarm from room 212. Eleanor Miller lay twisted on her bed, the left side of her face drooping, eyes unfocused, breathing labored. The stroke had been massive, stealing whatever clarity the previous evening had granted. She was asking for William when it happened, the night nurse explained. Then she just fell. Dr. Patricia Morgan arrived within minutes, her assessment swift and devastating. Brainstem involvement, extensive bleeding. "I'm sorry, Clara. We can make her comfortable, but..." "How long?" 48 hours, maybe less." Clara collapsed into the chair beside her grandmother's bed, still wearing her mother's wedding dress from the concert. She began singing Amazing Grace, the hymn Eleanor had taught her when she was 5, after her father's drinking had gotten bad. Her voice, raw from the previous night's performance, cracked on every third note. Silas arrived at 7:30, having driven through the sleet after seeing Clara's text. She's dying. Really dying this time. He found Clara holding Eleanor's limp hand, singing through tears, without words. He sat on Eleanor's other side, adding his voice to the hymn. Together they sang for 3 straight hours every song Eleanor had ever loved, from Methodist hymns to Motown hits she'd danced to with her husband before Thomas was born. By noon, word had spread through the nursing home. Residents who could walk gathered in the hallway outside room 212. Samuel Rodriguez brought his damaged saxophone, playing Summertime soft enough not to disturb, but loud enough to seep through doors. Mrs. Goldstein, in a rare lucid moment, sat in her wheelchair humming Yiddish lullabies her mother had sung in Poland before the war. She would have loved this, Clara whispered. All these people she cared for, gathering for her. Silas pulled out his phone, made a call. Marcus, I need the youth choir. All of them. Now. Within 2 hours, 37 children from Silas's Music Foundation filled the corridor. They ranged from 7 to 17. Kids from Vermont's poorest neighborhoods whom Silas had been funding but never actually met until today. They sang in shifts, careful not to overwhelm, creating a continuous river of sound that flowed into Eleanor's room. Mrs. Dorothy Chen violated 17 protocols, allowing the children to exceed visitor limits. Some things matter more than rules, she said, watching a 9-year-old with a voice like silver sing You Are My Sunshine, while tears rolled down her cheeks. At 4 p.m., an unexpected visitor arrived. Richard Warren, Silas's father, stood in the doorway of room 212 wearing a suit that cost more than Clara made in 6 months. He'd flown from Singapore on his private jet, landing in Burlington an hour ago. I came as soon as I saw the footage, he said quietly. Not the concert, though, that was beautiful. The interview Patricia Huang posted this morning, where you talked about William. Clara looked up, exhausted beyond courtesy. Mr. Warren. Richard moved into the room, his usual corporate armor cracking. I was 23 when William died. He was everything I wasn't. Warm, spontaneous, capable of love that defied logic. I hated him for it. Then I spent 40 years trying to forget him, and raised my son to be the emotionless success William never was. He approached Eleanor's bed, pulled out something from his jacket, a photograph, black and white, edges yellowed. William and Eleanor, summer 1968. He sent this from Saigon with a letter asking me to give it to her if he didn't make it back. Richard's voice broke. I never did. I thought it would be kinder to let her forget. Clara took the photo, her grandmother at 22, radiant in a sundress, laughing while William Warren, in army uniform, lifted her off her feet. They looked mythically happy, untouched by the tragedy ahead. She never forgot, Clara said. Even dementia couldn't take him from her. Richard knelt beside Eleanor's bed, this billionaire pharmaceutical CEO in his $1,000 shoes, kneeling on linoleum that hadn't been properly waxed in decades. Eleanor, he said clearly. It's Richard Warren, William's brother. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I should have fought for you too. I should have stood up to our father. William would have lived differently if I'd been brave enough to support his choices. He might have lived. Period. Eleanor's eyes flickered, found his face. For a moment, recognition dawned. Richard. Her voice was barely breath. Little Richie who played piano. Yes. William said you were scared of feeling. Said underneath the fear was music. Her right hand, the one not affected by stroke, reached shakily for his face. He loved you. Wanted you to be happy. Forgave you before there was anything to forgive. Richard Warren, who hadn't cried since his mother's funeral when he was 12, sobbed like a child. Silas held his father for the first time in 20 years while Clara sang softly, a wordless melody that sounded like absolution. The vigil continued through the night. The youth choir children slept in shifts on waiting room couches, their parents bringing pizzas and coffee, understanding something important was happening. James Patterson, despite being days from death himself, insisted on being wheeled to Eleanor's room. "She sat with me every night for 3 years, he wheezed. "I can sit with her for one." At 2 a.m. on January 25th, Eleanor's breathing changed. Clara knew the sound she'd heard it hundreds of times in 3 years of night shifts, the body's final negotiation with the soul. "Grandma." Clara leaned close. "It's okay to go." William's waiting. Eleanor's eyes opened one last time, completely clear. She looked at Clara, then at Silas. Their hands joined over her blanket. "Sing," she whispered. "The one about stars." Clara's throat constricted. "Twinkle, twinkle, little star." The first song Eleanor had taught her. The one they'd sung together after her father's suicide. When words were impossible but melody remained. Clara began, her voice barely audible. Silas joined. Then Richard. Then the children who'd woken in the hallway. Then the residents. The staff. Until the entire wing of Sunshine Manor was singing a child's lullaby about wondering at the dark. Eleanor smiled. "Until the stars fall," she said clearly, quoting William's inscription. Then she was gone. The singing continued for 5 more minutes, voices carrying Eleanor's spirit through walls and ceilings, past the dementia unit where confused souls momentarily remembered themselves, through the hospice wing where the dying felt less afraid, out into the Vermont night where stars actually were falling, a meteor shower no one had predicted, as if the universe itself was acknowledging that love had indeed won this time. Clara collapsed onto her grandmother's still chest, her sobs mixing with the last notes of the lullaby. Silas held her while she broke completely apart, understanding finally that sometimes the most beautiful songs are made of screams transformed by time into something bearable. The hallway filled with silence, not empty but full, pregnant with everything that couldn't be said. Then Samuel Rodriguez began playing Going Home on his saxophone, and one by one, people drifted away, leaving Clara and Silas alone with Eleanor's body and the strange peace that sometimes follows perfect grief. "She waited," Clara whispered. "She waited until she knew I wouldn't be alone." Silas kissed her forehead, tasting salt and sorrow. "You'll never be alone again. I promise." Outside, the meteor shower continued, stars falling like William's tears from whatever heaven soldiers find when love finally calls them home. The morning after Eleanor's funeral, attorney David Chen arrived at Sunshine Manor with a manila envelope that had been sealed for 56 years. Clara sat in the empty cafeteria, still wearing the black dress borrowed from Mrs. Dorothy Chen, staring at her grandmother's handwriting on the envelope. "To be opened only after my death, Eleanor Romano Miller, May 1969. Silas sat beside her, their grief-hollowed faces reflected in the cafeteria's scratched plexiglass windows. Richard Warren stood near the door, having extended his stay to help with funeral arrangements, the first truly fatherly thing he'd done in decades. "Your grandmother gave this to my predecessor in 1969, David Chen explained. She paid $50 a fortune then to ensure it would be kept safe and delivered according to her instructions." Clara's hands shook as she broke the seal. Inside, 2 documents, a letter in Eleanor's young handwriting, and an official death certificate. William Warren. March 30th, 1969. Quang Tri Province, Vietnam. The letter began, "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and the truth can't hurt anyone anymore. I've carried this lie for so long it became real. But bones don't stay buried forever. William died 2 weeks before his tour ended. The telegram came on April 2nd. The same day I discovered I was pregnant. I knew then that William's baby would be born into a world that wouldn't accept him no father. An unwed Italian mother. The Warren family who'd already rejected me. Anthony Miller proposed to me that very night. He was kind, older, had loved me since high school. He knew about William, knew about the baby. "Let me give your child a name," he said. "Let me love you both." We married within a week. 7 months later, Thomas was born premature. We told everyone. Anthony never questioned the baby's early arrival or the fact that Thomas had William's green eyes, not his brown ones. I loved Anthony, truly, but not the way I loved William. Anthony knew this and loved me anyway. We built a good life, a quiet life. When Thomas showed musical genius at age 4, Anthony never questioned where it came from. Though he himself couldn't carry a tune, Thomas grew up believing Anthony was his father. It destroyed him when Anthony died of cancer. Thomas was 12, so devoted, so broken. I wanted to tell him the truth then, that his real father died a war hero, that he came from love so powerful it defied everything. But how could I? Anthony had been the only father Thomas knew. When Grace died giving birth to Clara, Thomas shattered completely. He'd inherited William's passion, his artist's soul, his inability to survive great loss. I watched my son become his father's ghost, brilliant, tormented, destined for tragedy. The morning Thomas took his own life, he left me a voicemail. I dreamed about a soldier again. Mom. He said I have his voice. Why do I keep dreaming about soldiers? Clara, my darling granddaughter. If you're reading this, know that you carry the music of 2 tragic men who loved with such intensity it burned them alive. William Warren and Thomas Miller, your grandfather and father, were both destroyed by the weight of their own hearts. But you, sweet girl, you learned to sing in minor keys. You learned that broken voices sometimes make the most beautiful sounds. You are their redemption song. To whoever else reads this, if William had family, if they ever wondered what became of the Italian girl he loved, know that we lived. We survived. We carried his music forward through 2 generations. Thomas never knew William was his father, but he inherited everything: the talent, the passion, the fatal inability to compromise with a world that demands we love less than we're capable of loving. I'm not sorry for the lie. It gave Thomas a father who stayed, even if he wondered why his dreams were full of soldiers and songs he'd never heard. Forgive me. Or don't. The dead can't hear either way. Eleanor Romano Miller. Warren. The last name I never got to use. Clara set down the letter, her face pale as January ice. My father was William's son. Richard Warren moved forward, his corporate composure shattered. That makes you William's granddaughter. That makes you and Silas. He couldn't finish. First cousins once removed, Silas said quietly, his voice hollow. Close enough that this, he gestured between himself and Clara, becomes impossible. Clara stood abruptly, the chair scraping against linoleum. I need air. She fled to the parking lot. Silas found her by her Honda Civic, dry heaving into the snow. We can't, she whispered. We're family. Blood family. Everything between us is wrong. Clara, don't. Please. Just don't. They stood in the freezing parking lot. 2 people who'd found each other only to discover they were never supposed to. The fairy tale had become Greek tragedy. Amor fati turned to forbidden love. Inside, Richard Warren was on the phone with Marcus Brennan. I need you to come immediately. Bring everything you have on the Warren family genealogy. Marcus arrived within an hour, carrying boxes of documents he'd been researching since discovering the William connection. He spread papers across the cafeteria table, birth certificates, marriage licenses, adoption records. Richard, Marcus said carefully, there's something here about Silas. These adoption papers from 1990. Richard's face went white. How did you? It's public record if you know where to look. Marcus pushed a document forward. Silas Warren, born Simon Michael Foster, March 15, 1990. Parents Michael and Jennifer Foster, killed in a car accident on I-89, September 1990. Adopted by Richard Warren, October 1990. Silas, who'd returned from the parking lot, stared at the papers. What? Richard sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of his 70 years. Your parents were my college roommate and his wife. Michael was brilliant, kind, everything I wasn't. When they died, you were 6 months old, no other family. I was named in their will as guardian. You never told me I was adopted. I couldn't. I'd already lost William, lost my mother, alienated everyone who mattered. You were my chance to be the father I should have been, the brother I failed to be to William. I told myself the lie was protection from feeling abandoned, from questioning your place. But really, I was protecting myself from losing you if you went looking for your real family. So Clara and I are not related at all. No blood connection. The universe played a cosmic joke, brought together the grandson William never knew he had, and the son I chose to honor William's memory. Clara had returned, standing in the doorway, having heard everything. We're not family. Only in the ways that matter, Richard said. Through choice, through music, through the strange gravity that pulled you together. But not blood, never blood. The revelation should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like vertigo, the world tilting off its axis once again. Clara sat down heavily, processing the roller coaster of the last hour. Forbidden love to possible love to the question of whether love could survive such violent revelation. I need time, Clara said quietly, to think, to breathe, to figure out who I am now that everything I believed was a lie. That afternoon, 3 record labels contacted Clara. The concert footage had made her famous overnight, the cleaning lady with the voice of an angel, the woman who'd humanized Silas Warren. Nashville was calling, Los Angeles wanted meetings, New York promised studio time with legends. You should go, Silas said that evening, finding Clara packing Eleanor's room. Take the opportunities. You've earned them. Is that what you want? I want you to have choices, real choices, not obligation, not destiny, not forced proximity. If we're going to be anything to each other, it should be because we choose it, not because we're trapped in a nursing home in Vermont. But the universe had other plans. The next morning, Mrs. Dorothy Chen presented them with a petition signed by every conscious resident of Sunshine Manor, half the staff, and 300 family members. Please don't leave, it read. You found your voices here. Help us find ours. Samuel Rodriguez had dictated a addition. Music isn't about fame. It's about Tuesday nights when death feels too close and someone needs to hear they mattered. Stay, teach, sing for those who can't anymore. James Patterson, now actively dying, had managed to scrawl 3 more days, maybe 4. Want to hear Danny Boy one more time? Clara looked at the signatures. Some shaky with palsy, others bold despite arthritis. These people who'd given her purpose when her father's suicide had stolen it, who'd taught her that small audiences sometimes matter most. What do you think? She asked Silas. I think Thomas was William's son whether he knew it or not. I think I'm Richard's son, whether we share blood or not. I think you're Eleanor's granddaughter, and your father's daughter, and your mother's living memorial. He took her hand, careful, tentative. And I think we get to decide what happens next. No destiny, no fate, just choice. Clara squeezed his fingers, feeling the scars that matched the ones inside both their hearts. Then I choose to stay. For now, to sing James to sleep and teach Mrs. Goldstein new songs and figure out if what we have is real or just shared grief wearing love's costume. And the record deals can wait. The dying can't. That night, they sang for James Patterson again. Separate harmonies, careful not to touch, testing if their music could survive the truth that had almost destroyed them. The notes still fit together, perhaps even more beautifully for having been broken apart and consciously reassembled. February 1st arrived with James's last breath during Danny Boy's final verse. Clara and Silas's voices carrying him across whatever bridge exists between here and after. As his eyes closed, he whispered, "Martha, I can see you dancing." Love, they were learning, was less about destiny than decision, less about blood than choice, less about perfect harmony than conscious commitment to sing through discord until music emerged again. Valentine's Day arrived with a blizzard that shut down half of Vermont. Silas stood in the Vienna Opera House he'd flown there secretly 3 days earlier, bribing the administration to open the venue exclusively for a proposal. 40,000 roses lined the aisles. The Vienna Philharmonic waited in full formal dress. He'd planned to fly Clara there on his private jet, surprise her with the grandest romantic gesture money could create. The text from Mrs. Dorothy Chen arrived at 6 p.m. Vienna time. "She knows what you're planning. She's gone." Clara had left a note on his pillow at the Sunshine Manor break room where he'd been sleeping since Eleanor's death. "That's your world, not ours. If you want me, find me in mine." Silas left 50 confused Austrian musicians and 40,000 wilting roses, caught the next flight to Boston, drove through the blizzard to reach Sunshine Manor at 2 a.m. He found her in room 104, singing to Melissa Hartley, 28 years old. Terminal pancreatic cancer. 2 daughters under 5 who visited every morning. Melissa had been crying about missing their future weddings, their graduations, their first heartbreaks. Clara was singing, "What a Wonderful World," turning Armstrong's gravelly hope into a lullaby for someone who wouldn't see another spring. She didn't look up when Silas entered, but shifted slightly, making room for his harmony. They sang together without touching, their voices wrapping around Melissa like a blanket. The young mother stopped crying, smiled, whispered, "My girls will remember this. Somehow, they'll remember their mom heard beautiful things before she left." After Melissa slept, Clara and Silas sat in the empty hallway. The industrial fluorescents hummed above them. Somewhere, a machine beeped steadily, counting someone's remaining heartbeats. "Vienna," Clara said quietly. "Really? I wanted to give you everything. I don't want everything. I want something real." Silas reached into his pocket, not for the $100,000 Cartier ring waiting in Vienna, but for something Marcus Brennan had helped him create. 2 simple bands melted together: Eleanor's ring from William and a silver band from Thomas's effects, the one he'd worn while composing. "This is 3 generations of complicated love," Silas said, kneeling on the scuffed linoleum. "William and Eleanor, who couldn't be together. Thomas and Grace, who had 15 months before she died. Us, who found each other in the least likely place on earth." He looked up at her, this billionaire on his knees in a nursing home corridor at 2:30 a.m. "Clara Miller, will you marry me here, where we found our real voices, where your grandmother died and your father's music lives, where we learned that love isn't about grand stages but small rooms where people need songs?" Clara studied the improvised ring, understanding flooding her face. "You melted them together. Richard helped. He said William would approve, said love should be recycled, not buried. The cafeteria. Where else Mrs. Goldstein wants to make her potato kugel. Samuel's already planning the music. Mrs. Chen bought a dress online powder blue. She says you'd appreciate that." Clara knelt too, meeting him at eye level on the cold floor. "My grandmother's funeral was 2 weeks ago. She told me to stop being afraid of happiness. The media will call us insane. Let them." She kissed him then, tasting tears and possibility. March 1st, give people time to pretend they're scandalized before admitting they're charmed. That's 2 weeks away. Then we'd better start practicing our vows. March 1st dawned clear and impossibly bright. The nursing home cafeteria had been transformed with paper flowers made by the memory care unit during craft time. Doilies crocheted by residents covered every surface. The industrial coffee maker had been decorated with white ribbons that did nothing to improve its appearance, but everything to announce that joy was possible anywhere. Silas stood at the makeshift altar, two walkers draped with Eleanor's favorite tablecloth. Richard Warren stood beside him as best man, wearing a suit bought at Target to match his son's newfound simplicity. "I'm proud of you," Richard whispered. "William would be too. We both learned too late that love matters more than legacy." Marcus Brennan, ordained online through the Universal Life Church for $35, clutched note cards with shaking hands. "I've performed at Carnegie Hall," he muttered. "Why is this more terrifying?" The wedding march began not Mendelssohn, but La Vie en Rose, played by Samuel Rodriguez on saxophone despite fingers that could barely bend. Clara appeared in the doorway wearing her grandmother's wedding dress from 1947, altered by Mrs. Chen's daughter, who worked at a dry cleaner's. Mrs. Dorothy Chen walked beside her as matron of honor, having insisted, "Someone needs to represent the 3,000 nights you've worked here, singing people to heaven." The audience, 100 residents, staff, families, stood as one. Mrs. Goldstein had recovered enough cognition to blow bubbles from her wheelchair. Melissa Hartley, down to 70 pounds, had been wheeled in with her daughters, who threw dandelion seeds they'd saved from last summer. The vows were simple. Clara went first. "I promise to sing with you through every key change life brings, to find harmony in discord, to remember that the most important audiences are sometimes just one person at 3 a.m. who needs to know they're not dying alone." Silas followed. "I promise to choose love over perfection, to sing without gloves, without protection, without fear, to remember that you saved me from a life that looked successful and felt like death, to love you the way William loved Eleanor, the way Thomas loved Grace completely, catastrophically, without reservation." Marcus's voice cracked as he pronounced them married. "By the power vested in me by the internet and the state of Vermont." Their first kiss as husband and wife tasted like cafeteria coffee and hope. The reception menu featured Meatloaf Thursday's Special, Mrs. Goldstein's Potato Kugel, and a wedding cake from the grocery store bakery decorated with musical notes drawn in shaky icing by the Parkinson's support group. Their first dance wasn't to a wedding song, but to the prayer, the piece that had started everything. They sang to each other while dancing, their voices creating a sphere of sound that made the cafeteria's acoustic disaster irrelevant. Patricia Huang filmed everything, creating a documentary that would later win awards. But the moment that mattered most happened off-camera. Melissa Hartley pulling Clara aside to whisper, "Promise me you'll sing at my funeral. Something happy, something my girls can dance to when they remember me." 6 months later, the Eleanor and William Foundation opened its doors. Not a grand charity with galas and tax write-offs, but a simple program, free music therapy for every nursing home in Vermont, expanding nationally within a year. Clara directed the program, teaching volunteers that technique mattered less than presence. That perfect pitch meant nothing if you couldn't hold a dying hand while singing. Silas funded everything, liquidating his mansion to build the William Warren Memorial Concert Hall, a 100-seat venue attached to Sunshine Manor, where residents could attend real concerts weekly. The acoustics were perfect, the seats comfortable, the stage small enough that performers could see every face. The first performance featured inner-city children singing hip-hop arrangements of hymns. Mrs. Goldstein declared it better than Broadway, though she'd never been to New York. 1 year later, Clara stood in the same room where Eleanor had died, now converted to the Music Therapy Center. She held their newborn daughter, Grace Eleanor Warren, 6 pounds of possibility, with her great-grandfather William's green eyes and her mother's voice, already humming along to lullabies at 3 weeks old. Silas sat at the piano Thomas Miller had once played, the one they'd moved from Clara's childhood home. He played softly while Clara sang to their daughter, the same lullaby Eleanor had sung to Thomas, that Thomas had sung to Clara, that Clara had sung to the dying for 3 years before Silas arrived to shatter and rebuild her world. Through the window, they could see the memorial garden where Eleanor's ashes were scattered beneath a tree planted beside markers for William, Thomas, and Grace. 4 generations of complicated love, finally at peace. "What do you think she'll be?" Silas asked, watching their daughter grip Clara's finger with surprising strength. Whatever she wants. Singer, doctor, teacher, janitor. As long as she knows that every voice has value. Mrs. Dorothy Chen knocked, entering with forms. 3 new volunteers want to join the music program. They saw the documentary. 1 flew from California. Clara smiled, adjusting Grace in her arms. Tell them we start with the hardest cases. The ones who don't respond to anything. The ones whose families have stopped visiting. Like you were, Silas asked his wife. Like we both were. That night, as they had every night since the wedding, Clara and Silas walked the halls of Sunshine Manor, singing softly for those who couldn't sleep. They'd traded Vienna for Vermont, spotlight for fluorescent, fame for purpose. In room 147, where James Patterson had died, a new resident lay dying, a retired teacher who'd never married, never had children, never thought anyone would sing for her. Clara and Silas sat on either side of her bed, their daughter sleeping between them, and sang Amazing Grace as the woman's breathing slowed. Thank you, the teacher whispered. I thought I'd go alone. No one goes alone here, Clara promised. Not anymore. As the teacher passed, somewhere between the 2nd and 3rd verse, baby Grace opened her eyes and made a sound, not quite crying, not quite singing, but something in between. The beginning of a voice that would know both sorrow and joy, would learn that broken notes sometimes make the most beautiful songs. Outside, the stars didn't fall. Inside, love had already won. Every voice has a story, but only love gives it wings to soar. I need to tell you something about gratitude that Clara taught me, though she never said it in words. Real gratitude isn't about counting blessings or forcing positivity. It's about holding your grandfather's suicide note while singing lullabies to strangers. It's Silas on his knees, cleaning feces from walls, finally understanding that his mother's death wasn't the end of love, but its beginning. You see, family isn't blood. William never knew Thomas was his son, but that music passed through generations anyway. Richard raised Silas without shared DNA, but with chosen devotion. Eleanor kept loving a dead soldier through 50 years of ordinary Thursdays. Family is who shows up at 3 a.m. to sing you across the bridge. Family is Mrs. Goldstein making potato kugel with hands that barely remember her own name. Every night in that nursing home, broken people fixed each other through off-key hymns and forgotten lyrics. They were grateful not for health or wealth, but for the privilege of witnessing each other's last breaths, of proving that no one dies unheard. That's what I learned from this story. Gratitude is loving the world exactly as it breaks you, because the breaking is what lets light through. Family is whoever holds your hand while you sing yourself home.